What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. So today we are going to be talking about a topic that I do think is fairly interesting and definitely stems from some people in the community having a lot of questions surrounding this. So the main point was when I uploaded a video talking about the best Pokemon in the Great League. So many people were in the comment section saying, well, I've got a Raikou that falls right below it, I've got an Entei that falls right below it, and they may not understand why it may unfortunately not be that great of an option. So what I am going to do in today's episode is explain why legendary Pokemon in that league may not be such a great idea. And then finally, we will be taking a look at a spreadsheet and talking about what Pokemon could actually beat legendaries at the lower league levels. So if this video is helpful to you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the explanation. I really do feel that we are in class when we have this type of visual representation, but let's go ahead and do it. So we have 3 different glass sizes, and let's go ahead and make them each a different Pokemon. So the bottom smaller glass on the far left is going to be Kadabra, while the middle one is going to be Alakazam, and then finally the big bad tall boy is going to be Mewtwo. But there is a catch. We are going to be in the Great League. So when you are in the Great League, there is that CP cap of 1500. So let's go ahead and make this represent the CP cap. At the end of the day, if I were to fill up all 3 of these glasses with the same amount of water, which one would end up being better off? So visually, although it is the same amount of water into all of the glasses, they are all reaching a different set of potential. You have a Pokemon like Kadabra, which is near its full max potential underneath that Great League, while Alakazam definitely has some room to go. And then finally, Mewtwo's looking pretty poor. Like, I mean, look at that, it barely has any water in it. So what if we were to step it up to something like the Ultra League? All of a sudden, we have a bigger glass because it's 2,500 CP. But wait a minute, if I were to try to give this to Kadabra, I mean, we really only have a little bit more room to go. That's really all we can do. Yet at the same time, Alakazam has a lot of room for us to go ahead and add more into it before it ends up getting full. But then, there's a Pokemon like Mewtwo, where even if we were to put the entire water into the glass, and then even grab another one, it can surpass the Ultra League, and that's just because of its full potential is not realized until it gets to a larger league. So now, we are in Masters League. Kadabra is still capped out. It was capped out a long time ago. Alakazam might have a little bit more room to go, but where Mewtwo shines is actually in the Masters League because it can then reach its full potential at that time. So then the true question is, based on having some type of limit that we see set in front of us, which Pokemon is able to reach its maximum potential, and is its maximum potential better than the other Pokemon's potential at such a lower rate? An example of this would be a Kadabra at 100%. Is it better than a Mewtwo at 25%? That is what it's all about, and that is what we are going to get into today. So for the sake of time, to make this video as short as possible, what I'm gonna do is jump into a spreadsheet, talk about all of the different features of it, and then I will give you a real example of how some legendaries end up getting outpaced by other Pokemon. And then finally, a list of legendary / mythical Pokemon that are actually okay in at that Great League. So without further ado, let's jump into the spreadsheet. This spreadsheet may look familiar to you, and that is because Trainer Tips used it as well in one of his videos, but I noticed that some of the stats were wrong as well as some of the formulas as well. So what I've done is I've gone in and fixed all of that, as well as adding in some new information and some easier ways for you to, for example, go in and filter it, go in and change it, go in and do whatever you want. So let's go ahead and jump into like the actual features of it. So first things first, we have the base stats. Now this is something that we are going to already be familiar with. All that means is it's Pokemon's max potential stats. So for example, if we go and look at Mewtwo, you'll notice that we've got that 300 on the attack stat. And yes, we are completely used to that. But what we are not used to though, is its scaled attack once it's down to a lower level. For example, for it to make it into the Great League, it would have to be at a level 12.5 if its IVs were perfect. If you are interested in a list of all of the legendary Pokemon that actually can't make it into the Great League, what I did was I tested all of them out at a 0 IV, found the level. All of these unfortunately cannot make it in there, so a couple of these Pokemon you'll actually never see in the Great League unless something ends up changing and we can, like, for example, catch them in the wild. But other than that, we need to go ahead and move on to the IV part that we talked about. So for the IVs, all you have to do is put in the Pokemon's IVs into this, and so you can actually test out your own Pokemon in this. You can go and put some weird IV combinations and then figure it out. So as far as the current level, all you have to do is enter in your Pokemon's level as well, and then it will give you the CP of your Pokemon. Up next, of course, is the value for the level of the attack, defense, and HP. So if you have a Pokemon that, for example, we've got Manectric at level 22, it's not going to reach its full potential at the level of 22. This is its scaled down version of it. And then you've got the Great League max level, Ultra League max level, and then finally you have a stat total, which is just a sum of these. And that is important to point out because it's just the stats at that level, not just the Pokemon stats. Otherwise, you'd have a Pokemon like Mewtwo or something just coming in at number 1 every time, but that's not how it's going to work. It's just going to take your scaled down version of your stats, which is very important because that is going to help us make a major comparison. So by the way, this spreadsheet will be put onto a Google Doc that I will upload. Go ahead and check out the link in the description if you want to poke around with this now that you know everything about it. Go in there, mess around with it, change things, put in your Pokemon's information, see how high up they need to go, test it out. But let's go ahead and get into a real life example. So some of the more common types of Pokemon that people have been referencing have been like Raikou, Zapdos, Moltres, Entei, all of those, and that makes perfect sense because we do have access to them in the special research, which puts them down at level 15, and they can all qualify for the Great League, especially if you end up with some bad IVs. But let's go ahead and take a look at some perfect IVs of those Pokemon. As you will see, I have Raikou and then Zapdos in as a different color, and we are now going to verse other electric type Pokemon and see how they stack up. We do have it sorted by the stat total, and as you will see, they are nowhere near the top. Now, does that mean that they are necessarily out of the game? No. And one major factor of that is probably going to be that attack stat. You have an attack stat on Raikou of 132, and if you look above it, there are a couple that end up competing with it. For example, you have a Pokemon like Luxio, or another option like Plusle, believe it or not. Plusle could end up being a fairly good choice, but by the way, this is something I do want to point out as kind of like a disclaimer. For example, you have a Pokemon like Luxio that can technically outperform Raikou in the Great League, but there is a catch. You would have to power up your Luxio all the way to level 40 to be able to outpace that Raikou. Is it worth it? Well, that's going to be up to you. Should you spend an insane amount of Stardust to get a Pokemon completely maxed out versus a Raikou where you can just literally use it out of the box if you got it at level 15? That's definitely something to consider, but as you can see how the stats work out, just kind of taking a look at it, there's quite a bit of fairly common ones as well that end up outpacing it. But of course, at the end of the day, if you end up wanting to use those legendary Pokemon, you're going to do it anyways, have a little bit of style, but just know there are other Pokemon that technically outperform it. So what are some of those legendary Pokemon that still hold strong when you head down to the Great League? Well, to be honest, to put it in a nutshell, it's really the bad legendaries that really get a chance to shine in the Great League. Something like a Registeel could actually be fairly good in the Great League versus being in the Masters, it's not gonna work. Another Pokemon that I was personally very interested in was Mew and Celebi. Those are two that I have personally not powered up, so I was very curious about that. And believe it or not, they actually stood the test of time. Mew and Celebi are going to be fairly good versus other psychic types, so definitely keep those in mind. But at the end of the day, you can go into this spreadsheet, check out anything and everything that you want. I did give you a couple of examples that work out. Then on the flip side, there are a couple that don't really work out, like Raikou and then Zapdos as well. So by all means, have fun with this spreadsheet. Hopefully this did explain why you've got legendary Pokemon that won't necessarily be good at lower levels. If you did enjoy this type of video and it was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.
Hit me like a tidal wave, triggered by the aftershock. Hit me like a tidal wave. triggered by the aftershock. Oh, oh.